see so many familiar faces in the crowd, and for those who I haven't met, my name is Michael Doe, and I'm one of the curators of the Talks programs. Sydney Contemporary, I mean, it's a very interesting place, as we all know. You're all here, you've been experiencing it. Fundamentally, it's a great place to transact art. We love that. But it's also an equally important place to discuss art. And that's what we aim to do with Talk Contemporary. And the thing that my co-curator, Stephen Todd, and I aim to do is to really build thought leadership. And we are day 2 of the talks, day 3 of the fair. And we've really run the kind of spectrum of different talks so far, and there's many more to continue. So we've had some kind of more fibrous, difficult to chew and digest talks, and then some beautiful moments of just melt in your mouth deliciousness. And I think that this panel will sit somewhere in between, maybe closer to the latter. I think it's going to be fun, I think it's going to be fizzy, and hopefully it'll have a really good mouthfeel. And so, can you tell I've been doing a sommelier course? And so I just want to offer a little trigger warning before we begin, because you will leave here, no doubt, disappointed. There's 1 hour. We cannot cover the entire collecting base in this short time. So that's where you come in, because I'm a little bit worse for wear, day 3, remember. Ask questions. Pick up on the things that I didn't talk about, and be unashamed, unapologetic, and unrepentant in your questions. Let's go. So let me introduce our fantastic panel, the backbone of today's discussion. On the end there, we have the wonderful Nikita, who here you are, is a startup advisor at Amazon Web Services and an angel investor with a particular interest in art tech, robotics, and AI. But beyond technology, Nikita has cultivated an incredible, admirable passion and following of art for the past 8 years, and has a wonderful collection, many of my favourite artists. And Nikita is also the chair of Art Centre Melbourne's Contemporary Foundation. Next to her is Billy. Billy Maynard is the director of Billy Maynard Architects, a studio-based architecture and practice in Sydney, who has a very precise approach to urban and rural sites that emphasise innovative approaches to sustainability, and someone who is very steeped in art and artists. Next to Billy is Tom Crago, a Melbourne-based author, artist, and entrepreneur. He's the CEO of internationally renowned video game developer, Tantalus, and many of you may know The Legend of Zelda or Age of Empires. Well, this is the guy. And next to me is Naomi Tosic, a qualified physiotherapist, software developer, and co-founder of the office space in Surrey Hills. And as a way of honouring the love of art that her late husband Boris introduced to their lives, Naomi has embarked on a new-ish role at the Art Gallery of New South Wales as the Next Gen Development Coordinator, and does incredible things. So, follow that group, Atelier. Plug, plug, plug. Okay, so we're here to talk about collecting, and we're going back to the start. We're talking about old-fashioned connoisseurship, okay? Which is becoming rarer and rarer with all the middlemen and art advisors and all these other people with roles I don't quite understand. We're talking about personal taste. We're talking about expressing without speaking, magpie-like acquisitiveness, curiosity, originality, and the personal. We're talking about people who have treasures, who have assembled these treasures through yearning, insider knowledge, and just absolute grit and determination. We all have an idea of what a collector is, and we're about to paint a very different picture of what collecting is here, today, and now. How much do you trust me?
Entirely.
Good. All right, we're going to play a really fun game. Rapid fire, okay?
Take it in turn.
I want to hear responses. We're going to start with Nikita, and then I'm going to reel the answers back in, okay? And I do not want to hear any dithering. I think they should be on. Just hold them. Okay, so choose one of the two. Collector or hoarder?
Collector.
Hoarder. Collector.
Hoarder.
Okay. Depth or breadth?
Depth.
Depth. Depth.
Depth.
Love or money?
Love.
Love. Love.
Love.
Painting or sculpture?
Painting.
Painting. Painting.
Sculpture.
Okay, okay. Writing my notes. Australian or international?
Australian.
Australian. Australian.
Australian.
And my favourite, lump sum or lay-by?
Lay-by.
Always within my means, lump sum. No lay-by was possible. Lump sum.
Yeah, lay-by probably.
Nice. Okay. Now it's interesting, the two hoarders on the panel. Because I think a collector is someone who can probably let go of things, you know, can kind of, you know, it's in, it's out, it's right, it's wrong. So tell me about these hoarder tendencies. And I've had the great fortune of coming into, you know, Naomi's very impressive home. And I think there's art in the garage.
Yeah, hoarder.
Yeah. So tell me where this hoarding began.
I attach so much emotion to things, not for their materiality, but I think what they represent. And I will hoard clothes and, you know, children's drawings and things like that. So it's not just art, but whereas for Boris, for my late partner, he just could, you know, kind of be quite, I don't know, sort of ruthless in terms of what he let go of to make room for more. But it's like Harry Potter and the Horcruxes. I just find there's souls in things and I can't let them go.
Yeah, beautiful. And the other hoarder, is it the same?
I guess, you know, it's hoarding for some people, but for me it's these series of small collections that all of a sudden add up and other people, you know, are annoyed with their presence, you know. Yeah, sure, it's hoarding, but it's also just kind of your history of your life collected in objects that you don't want to let go. And for me, I guess kind of wrapping everything from being an architect and looking, it's all wrapped into one. So you need these things to influence you. And if you let go of them all, you'd kind of be a bit lost, I'd say.
Yeah, and Billy, I know that you collect art, but you also collect many other things as well. And so can you tell me about where your hoarding has kind of, you know...
Where it's gone?
Yes.
Yeah. My wife would say I collect too many Speedo trunks and they're always wet. You know, like I've always been an op shopper or flea market, so it's kind of lots of little things. One collection particularly is a collection of Billy Ben works, and I've created a way to salon hang them, tiny little postcard works from Arrowta artists who I think is just absolutely incredible. And then the other things, you know, kind of certain Murano glass makers from the 50s and other kind of strange bits of cracked pottery that I have found on building sites and love. And so yeah, it's just, as I said, it's all wrapped into one and there's no real hierarchy and, you know, a huge painting over some tiny little pebble.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, art is a lens to view the world, I personally think, but, you know, it's one of the lenses among a kind of plethora of a repertoire of, you know, lenses that you can pick up and use. And so it really does illustrate the point of this idea of connoisseurship. You know, and you've got to sit with it, you've got to be with it, you've got to hone it, you've got to get real sharp about what it is.
Yeah, look, to add to that, I think it's kind of like a game. You're constantly looking, and again, if you kind of wrap everything up into one, it's that game that kind of keeps you going. Just that search for looking, and, you know, together with a partner, it's a really fun thing to do, and it's always something to talk about. And
Yeah, and so the case for collecting now, Tom and Nikita.
Well, I'm going to justify my collecting mindset with, I suppose, a hint of hoarding tendency in that I love lending pictures. So I'll not let go of something. I'll lend it to parents or family members or friends, so I can kind of maintain the hoard in a sense, but share the love. And I derive great pleasure from going to a friend's house and seeing a painting that I bought that perhaps I've moved on from but wasn't wanting to let go of. So, you know, in that way it still feels a part of my collection, but it's shared lovingly with family and friends.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And on my side, it's probably a lot more around, I do think quite deeply about kind of the succession planning of the works and who I would pass them on to, you know, perhaps one day when I can't fit them in my home, or when I inexorably pass away. And I really deeply do kind of curate where they will be and which other pieces will kind of go on that journey together. And I do love to also rehang when new works come in. And so I think for me there's a difference between hoarding feels like there's this collection of artifacts, and I think collecting to me feels a little bit more like curating how the pieces work together, and you know, what your style and who you are is in that very moment of time as they come through. And so I feel like the collection is dynamic and it's living, and so therefore I feel like collector suits better than hoarder, because as opposed to just adding, it's kind of reflecting. But equally, I am definitely amassing and haven't actually sold any works yet, so.
Okay, well, the continuum, right? And so I'm kind of curious about, Nikita, what's your relationship to the term? I mean, are you happy being called a collector? Because you have a very high-profile sort of art advocacy role.
Absolutely, I love it. In fact, I think on my Instagram it says art collector. So I would very happily call myself one, and huge advocate for talking about how, as opposed to just buying an artwork to furnish a home, when I speak with my friends around about the collecting that I do, how it's more around getting to know the artist, building a relationship with the works. And I think there's definitely a link between somebody who is committed to being within this art world and to living with their pieces as a relationship versus buying pieces to aesthetically furnish the environment that you're in.
Yeah, and I do want to move on to the next kind of, pop quiz, option that I said, which was breadth or depth. And, this is an interesting one, and it's an interesting divide because, of course, the idea of a collector or a hoarder is talking about just the sheer number of objects, but it is a little bit different when you have a sheer number of objects of a very specific, thing, and have a deep relationship with those things. And so maybe Nikita, because we've got some photos of you here with the dear artist and wonderful friend Tom Polo. Do you want to talk a little bit about that sort of depth?
Yeah, so I think where depth comes in for me is I love building relationships with the artists that I'm procuring works from. And a couple of years ago, I was actually at Mars Gallery, Andy's here in the audience, and there was a beautiful work on display by a woman called Harry McKay. And she's a drawer from Adelaide, I think, actually. And she had this beautiful quality, having just come out of university, where the characters that she was drawing, who were potentially friends of hers, had such a mystery to them. I wanted to know more about them. And I thought to myself, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to be depicted in this way and have someone looking at that work saying, who is this person? What's their relationship to the artist? And wondering some of these questions, and then to learn that story. I think I've always seen works as very much a Rosetta Stone, a translation piece. There's something that the artist is telling you, and there's something that you're kind of reading into it as well. And so I kind of hit on this idea that wouldn't it be amazing to get to know the artist's practice so deeply and so well by being the sitter for them, and decided that I'd embark on this 30-year journey where every year I choose an artist. I sit down with them, we have sittings, we chat, I get to understand and learn more about their process. And at the end of it, there is a portrait of sorts of me. The most recent one that I did, and hopefully it'll come up on the screen, I think in the next image, is with one of my dear friends, Tom Polo, and he's not he's definitely an abstract, more figurative artist, and so asking him if he would do a portrait of me was a very different kind of request. It was very much I'd love you to be part of this portrait series, but could we sit down and maybe through the conversations that we have, can I learn a little bit more about your process and can they inspire the work that you produce? And we have this beautiful work that's just been completed about a week ago that's come out of it. This is the second in the portrait series. And Tom has been wonderful throughout the process. And this is the Harry McKay work, just by the way. But Tom's been wonderful. As we were sitting down, we had 3 sittings. He'd tell me how his process was being informed by the conversations that we were having. So first off the bat, I was sitting there and he was kind of drawing circles and lines on the canvas. And he goes to me at the end of the session, Nikita, do you know what these circles and lines represent? And I was like, no, Tom. How have they been inspired by the conversation that we've been having? And he was like, you talk so much with your hands. They're actually your hand gestures. And it was the body language and the conversation that we had through your hands that I've depicted here as kind of this base layer. And it's amazing to see how that then developed over a period of about 8 to 9 months. So collecting in depth through those artists that I really want to build relationships with in depth.
Yeah, and it's an association that is not just through the object, it's through kind of the interpersonal, and
Exactly.
You'll have that forever, and actually what a bond that is, yeah.
And in that sense, I will be hoarding those.
Yes, yes.
Never to be got rid of.
Has anyone else had a portrait commissioned or a work commissioned?
I haven't, but most of my work is abstract. One of the very few figurative, it's abstract in a sense, but figurative works I've got is a painting that Jeremy Kibble did for the Archibald. It was the Archibald that Ben Quilty won, and it's of Jeremy's mentor, Robert Jacks. And everybody thinks it's me, because it looks a bit like me. So people are sort of so surprised that I've got this huge portrait hanging in my dining room of what, in fact, of Robert Jacks, but everyone thinking it's of me. That's the closest I've got.
That's no bad thing. That's no bad thing. And Naomi, I know that depth is a very important part of what you do with your collection as well. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can probably refer to Boris because he was the real connoisseur, and I'm thinking particularly of artist Sister Karita Kent, and I'm not sure if many would know her, but I have been so blown away by how many works Boris has collected of hers, and we have an office space, Abby is here, hi, in Paramount, and we have a lot of those works in the Paramount space, and they're these incredible serigraphs. She was, I think at the age of 18, she went into into a nun play. What is convent?
Yes.
What's it called? Convent. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not Catholic. Should know. But she was
hold it against you.
No. She was a Sister of Immaculate Heart. That's what it was. And she was a social advocate and an educator. She started this incredible art school in this particular convent. And if anyone is interested, just look up Sister Karita Kent's 10 rules. It's phenomenal, and they are sort of rules of how to practice art, but really how to live life. And she's sort of got this cult following. Boris has so many of her works over the years, and maybe 30. I'm quite shocked because they've just come into our life at different times, and even a few months after he'd passed, something arrived at our house, and it was artwork that he had bought of hers, and it just had this incredible slogan. It sat behind an altar in a church somewhere, and it just said in these bright letters, "Power Up," and it was just so phenomenal. I remember sitting with my boys and just saying, this is a message from the other side. And he had bought it. I remember when he bought it, but I'd forgotten about it. It was getting restored because it was incredible, and it needed that restoration. But that has been something really interesting for me, the depth and the passion that he will have. And I really loved the thought. I remember buying all the books about Sister Karita Kent and just being fascinated by her, and her real social justice bent. And I just had this thought. I was like, Boris is in heaven meeting Sister Karita Kent. Like, it just was this thing of like, on another plane this will work in some sense. And yeah, it's quite beautiful when you sort of really commit to something. And I don't even know if he realised what he was kind of purchasing, because it's incredible slogans and a lot of words and a lot of beautiful, vibrant work. But and there's so many artists that I look at. Julia Knif is another one, a Croatian artist, and Boris had seen him as a boy behind Tito. There was a Picasso and a Knifa, and it's just this story of legend that as he kind of was able, he would start acquiring his works, and we have so many of those works as well, and it's beautiful when you can see how someone is really passionate about a particular artist. So
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, fun and games aside, when I say, depth or breadth, what I am really asking is about a relationship to art and relationship to artists. And I mean, Naomi, you've spoken a little bit about Boris, and I know who Boris is, and we've had, a wonderful discussion, but I'd love to, would you be open to sharing a little bit more about that? Because you've had a complete sort of J-turn in your life, and you now have a really incredible direct relationship with artists as a result of what was an incredible tragedy.
I could take up the whole hour, so I'll just cherry pick all the key things. But Boris grew up in Yugoslavia. He jumped the ship in Sydney Harbour and just worked and made a life for himself. So when we're talking about collecting, it's money that has been earned. And one of the first things that he bought when he was working in the building site was a Tim Storia burning rope, and he bought it from Eva Brau Gallery in Wallara, and he just had this enormous emotional reaction to the work, and he didn't understand it. I think his English probably wasn't even that good at the time, and he was embarrassed to even tell people what he paid for it, which I think was phenomenally, realistic in terms of what it's worth now. But he just had this emotional reaction to the art, and there's so much in that story, but it's how I learned to love art. It's like I watched him and his emotion with art. So I was thinking I often attribute all my art love to Boris, but actually when I had my first job, when I was working for Qantas as with software and physio and things, one of the first things I bought with my paycheck was artwork, but it was sort of more commercial. It was the Viamont, the Bali artwork, but it was expensive. They were limited edition prints, but I met Boris and I thought, this is serious art now, and not even monetary value, but just in a relationship with artists, and living artists, Australian artists, but also international as well. And so I just see art not as something inaccessible, regardless of kind of your education or your money, but something you can start the journey. And I think that's the key to collecting. It takes time, and you can't acquire it straight away. You can't buy your way in. It's something that you treasure over time.
Yes.
I remember being at university and wanting a painting, so usually from a friend. So in one particular case, a guy I went to high school with, and I knew how much the painting cost, and I'd equate that to the number of hours that I needed to work in my shitty hospitality shift to be able to buy the painting. So each hour got me kind of closer to being able to get the picture. And I can totally relate to that sense of compulsion. I didn't know why I wanted it, but I just needed it, And then once you start on that journey or slippery slope, you might say, you kind of can't stop.
Yeah. And so we're kind of working towards origin stories. So Naomi, yours was a very important person, and I'd love to hear whether it was a person or thing. Where did it all begin? What corrupted you? That's essentially what I wanted to know. Maybe Billy. I think you could share.
Probably the same space, Billy.
Yeah.
Probably just a few things. Growing up with a life in art, and being lucky to be surrounded by that. And then having a very addictive personality, kind of, I'm not into gambling or, playing golf. It's like, you form addictions, and this is one of them. And probably wanting to be an artist for many years meant that I have so many friends as artists, so the ability to have kind of access to ideas, new things, see their work before it comes out and acquire it, that kind of sets you off on the right way. And actually I think travel's a huge part of it too. Seeing things, it's like it's like a universe when you go on a good trip, and that can last a long time. Yeah.
For me, I was actually studying performance art in London a long time ago, so I've always been a deeply creative person, and I love art in all shape and form. And I left London, came back to Australia and started working in technology and cybersecurity, which, as you can probably imagine, is a far cry from the art world, a little bit drier. But I remember at the time thinking, gosh, I miss my artistic people, the people who were around me in London. And so I started to go into galleries as my way of finding those people. I wanted to become friends with artists, which is what I'd had when I was in London. And instead, what I realised is I was making enough money to actually, for the first time, be able to support these people who could and would be my friends. And it was very much almost, maybe in some ways a responsibility, a way of being able to surround myself with creativity, but also just purely out of love. So I think there's definitely a sense of that relationship as well.
And Tom, I mean, you have some very kind of important people in your kind of constellation and social who...
Well, certainly I was, from the outset, drawn very viscerally to the work of a friend from high school who was starting his journey as an artist, and I just wanted to surround myself with as much of that beauty as possible, and that often came at the expense of buying groceries, you know, when I was at university, and I guess, you know, moving forward from there, you know, my decisions were very aesthetic. I'd see work that I loved, and if I could afford it, I'd buy it, and certainly I bought work then that I no longer display, that I've loaned out, or some of it's even in storage, but it's been a step-by-step journey, I guess, that's been informed by a very sort of, you know, phenomenological sense of what I wanted to have around me, and then through my ex-wife, Kate Tucker, who's a painter, in collaboration with her, and that lovely thing, as sort of Billy alluded to, where you do buy work together, and what a delight when you sort of agree on most things, you know, and you're able to make those decisions as a couple or as a partnership.
That is a true gift, yeah. And how you resolve the other moments, they end up being gifts too. A lot of life lessons. I can certainly speak to that. Everyone said love. I would have said money.
Nikita, there's a little bit of money in you, isn't there? Just a hint. Just your.
We had this discussion the other day. I do have a philosophy around this. So I think, as we're all aware, there is a change in the economy underfoot, and the younger generations have less discretionary income if they do want to also buy a house than perhaps their parents may have had. And so being able to justify buying art for art's sake and just for love, I think is a barrier to entry to the industry, pure and frank, to be honest. And so I think we do need to start thinking of art, as much as we think of it as love, as potential investment. And on the flip side of that, the more investment that actually enters this art ecology, the more artists that can be supported, the more artists that are supported, the more artists that can then enter the space, which is amazing. And then what we actually start to see is we start to see people pushing the boundaries. So if we want more creative spaces, if we want artists to push the boundaries, and we want people to be able to collect incredible Australian art and find a market for it so that more art can be collected, we actually should start to think of art as money as well as love. But I do strongly believe there is so much choice out there that you should never have to choose just for investment. You should be able to choose a piece that perhaps you can also invest in, but that you also deeply love.
I always think never or, always and. Love and money. Yeah.
We've got the depth of talent in Australia that we can have both. I mean, you walk around any city in the world, you walk around New York, walk around Tokyo, and then you walk around here. Well, I'm here to tell you that we're world class in terms of the breadth of our talent here in Australia. So we really should have. I mean, these pictures should be selling for way more than they are, frankly. And if they're in a city like New York, they would be. So being able to have both, I don't think is too much to ask for.
Yeah, I agree. And Nikita, but take me to the mechanics of this, because, you know, the tech world is something I don't really quite know, but, you know, this is amazing. I mean, wait till you hear this.
So I have a philosophy that kind of extends beyond what I've just shared, insofar as I've been investing now in, or investing, I call it investing, buying art for the last 8 years. And art truly taught me about investing in startups, if I'm honest, and kind of vice versa. So in startup land, if you invest kind of as an angel investor, a very, very early stage investor, you kind of call yourself pre-seed stage. In startup land, it goes kind of pre-seed, seed, series A, and at each point, the valuation of the business is kind of supposed to grow. And you'll get priced out, and institutions will start investing the later the stages are. So I always think buying emerging artists kind of mimics investing as an angel investor in the startup world. And if you do start to think about how it operates, what you actually start to see is you start to see artists coming out of university. They go to places like, for example, in Melbourne, it would be like a West Space. So they go to these kind of group shows and group spaces, and then they go on to some of the early stage kind of feeder galleries who might get them into a few early collectors' homes. Then the artist will move into a later stage gallery where their price point might be a little bit higher, and those galleries will have relationships with collectors who can afford to buy slightly more expensive art, and at that point they'll probably get them into certain institutions or foundations, which will then drive other institutions to start looking at the artist's work. And so in that kind of vein, when you look at the journey of an artist that ends up going from kind of inception to someone that does somewhat well, as we would say, maybe getting into the NGV or the AGNSW, what you actually start to see is you see there are a whole bunch of ecosystem players at each tier in this market that mimic the startup market, where you'll have early stage investors, then you have family offices who might come in a little bit later, you have we call early stage VCs, late stage venture capital firms, and then eventually to IPO or acquisition for that business. And so you have this kind of mimicry on both sides of the coin. And what we've seen in startup land is as businesses like Canva and Atlassian have exited, their founders have made their own family offices and invested back into the ecosystem, but also the early stage employees of those businesses have gone on to found their own companies. And through that, more money has actually entered the ecosystem, more startups have been made, and we're starting to see more and more unicorns come out. And I think it's exactly the same in the art world. If we can start to think of art as a market and investment opportunity, we can also drive these amazing international potential artists just by investing in our own ecosystem here. And I think that's unbelievably exciting. So we kind of have that power, which is awesome.
And I've got a real life example of that. You'll see one of the pictures is the Big Ben Quilty. I remember it was 9 years ago when we borrowed to Ben's studio in Robertson, and I saw down one of the corridors there was a little studio and someone was doing these beautiful floral works, and I remember saying to Boris, I'm going to buy that, I love that work. He's like, no, that's not serious. And she won the Archibald this year, it was Laura Jones, and I just think I loved it. I should have just bought it, and I kept thinking about it, and now, she is someone that has kind of done incredible things. So I think, yeah, you do need to love it, but also it's incredible investment. Some speculation around where people can go, and you're part of supporting their journey.
And, well, don't be afraid to be led by instinct either, I suppose. Like, if you genuinely do form that attachment, then go for it.
I think the other thing is, if they don't have that trajectory, keep buying if you love it, and that's one thing I'd say is that trajectory worked for a lot of artists who've, gone through the university, gone through the academies and kind of danced to the drum, but there are a lot of amazing artists that just don't have that success, and you've got to have the courage to just continue buying it because your eye loves it. I think that's very important for me. Yeah.
I mean, and certainly investing and purchasing art is one avenue to support artists, and I think we're all very kind of, on that bandwagon. But there are many other ways that you can help the ecology and feed it and input. And I want to hear about you, Billy, because you do things that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work in some of the things you've done with your own architectural practice.
Yeah. Look, I guess there's a few parts to that. One is how influenced I am by artists' work. So I'm constantly kind of feeding back ideas that kind of friends and artists have into my own architectural practice. The other thing is bringing artists in to collaborate on projects. So whether it's public projects or in homes, I would almost in every project bring an artist in to do something. And then the other part of it is I seem to have made a cottage industry out of designing homes for artists and getting paid in paintings, and which has been great. Yeah, anyway, it's worked for a little while, and it's sweat equity, and they're my close friends, and some of them I think are some of the best painters, especially in Australia, and have amassed quite an amazing collection that, you know, kind of, especially in the early days, that kind of poor city means wouldn't have allowed to collect, and then just friendships. So I really stress that. You know, great artist Matthew McWilliams from Paris, and shows in Sydney. You know, and it's just through a great friendship, and I think he's an extraordinary artist, and have just continued to collect his work.
Naomi, stage is yours, come on.
This is perfect, thank you. I'm very excited to talk about Atelier. So Atelier is a next-gen group at the Art Gallery in New South Wales, and it was such a beautiful opportunity for me to step into the art world, I guess on my own terms. I had identified that it was Boris' thing, but I'd had privileged access to art and artists and had been around that, but the opportunity came up to step into this role, and I just love my job and my group. So we basically, it's collecting as a collective, and I think that's incredibly powerful. So there's about 200 atelier, and they're all ages, but for me, I say it's around the new guard. It's sort of that new philanthropic bent, and we get to have input in the types of art that we acquire for the art gallery, the programs that we support as well. So yeah, Atelier is really exciting, and for me, it's not an art club, it's not a calendar of events, it's around materially supporting art and artists, and it's really exciting. The Art Gallery New South Wales Foundation is having its 40th anniversary this year, and it's quite extraordinary, the amount of money that has been paid for art and the enormous kind of multiple kind of outcome of that. I think the collection's value has sort of increased sevenfold, even more, and it's interesting to see what you can do at this stage and at this level, and how over time, so much of this is about time and not rushing things. There's no shortcuts with collecting, but I love Atelier, and it's such a fantastic group, so I encourage you all to have a little look, or just in any sort of way that you can be part of a collective that are supporting artists and acquiring work. So things like coming to Sydney Contemporary as well, just being part of that ecosystem that you talk about.
You know, it's a really fundamental thing, you know, philanthropy, and it's not lost on me, and I have, you know, many artist friends who have directly benefited from these programs, and anyway, I mean, I don't work for the art gallery, but, you know,
I do. Come and talk to me later.
Okay, let's also move to the next kind of little, you know, final bit of the conceit, and then we can throw to questions. Only one person said sculpture, and that was Naomi.
Okay, my sculpture experience, and I'll jump in. We talked about it before. It's Gibbs Farm in New Zealand. I remember going to that with Chris Sains from Crago, and it's just the most phenomenal experience. It just shows what you can do with a lot of money and, you know, incredible taste, and buy the best sculpture. So I love all types of artwork, but I'm really compelled by sculpture. So Anish Kapoor, Richard Serra, even just, you know, James Angus, people that are local as well, and I just think sculpture's so beautiful.
And those people make wall-based works as well, which are read as painting.
Yes,
as well.
yeah.
I mean, maybe what I am is actually critiquing my own question, you know, but I'm kind of curious, you know, why you chose to say painting over sculpture.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting binary that you put us in there, and we just had to respond to it. But I would say it's, you know, it has been unfashionable to say, you know, I love painting, potentially. And I think painting still has a lot to offer us, and I think it was worth responding that way.
Yeah. No, I agree.
When you think about the journey that a guest takes through your house, so perhaps someone with whom you're close, but who hasn't visited your house before, and as you walk them through, or as they walk through, of course you want a mix of painting and sculpture, you know, even in multimedia art, all kinds of art. And I think we do curate our own collections in that way, even room by room. So every room in my house has got a sculpture in it, you know, even if it's something very small, but predominantly, I suppose, the work that I've collected or been drawn to has been something usually that's in a frame that I bang a hook into the wall and hang. But sculpture certainly forms, you know, a very primal, significant part of the work that I collect too.
Yeah. Well, I'm always for Anne, so, you know, never and all. But anyway, I do appreciate that was me. Collecting takes a lot of time. I mean, time is something that has emerged as a theme, and we've spoken about it a little bit on this panel, and it's hard work, you know, because no, it's hard work because because there's always that sense of, I don't want to fuck that up, you know, I don't want to make that mistake.
No, I'm going to disagree. It's living life and.
Point at something, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard work to earn, and that's why I said labour. I remember being at Sydney Contemporary, and there was a phenomenal Bill Henson in a circle frame.
Tell me you got that.
I did, but the story is Boris wanted it, and he and Roslyn there's maybe, I don't know, 6 years ago, he and Roslyn were haggling about it, and they both walked off in a storm, and I snuck up to Cassandra and said, I'll take it, but I need to pay it off, like, until Christmas, basically. And I think it was early in the year, I had like 6 months to pay it off, but it was my housewarming to Boris. And also, he had bought an incredible Bill Henson, which reminded him of, like, our first kiss, he said, and then I bought one as the final present for him. And it was more in a recline, and it was almost like that reflected our stage of life. So the collection is never an acquisition, it's an expression, always. For us, we've done it through art, and it happens to look beautiful, but not always. It's sort of conversation points. That's just joy and living life, and I think I don't worry about getting it right or wrong, because I live with it, and yeah, it's... If I think about leaving the home that Boris built for us, which you can see some of the photos, it's beautiful, but the art remains, and the art of these, they just capture so much of our life together the last 18 years. And before I met him, his time coming from Croatia and the different artists. So, and yet now without him, I'm collecting different things, more modestly, but we were talking about Stanislava Pinchuk and collecting work of her that reflects my stage of life. So yeah, it's a joy.
I think intuition is something that people often think is a bit woo-woo, but you hone it over just years of looking, and it's that, I think it's that, without being too grand about it, that kind of wisdom that you trust yourself, and I think intuition is so important when looking.
You walk around here, don't you, when you sort of instinctively, it's sort of in your mind, you know, yes, no, and yes doesn't mean I want to buy it. Yes means I'm going to take a closer look at it. You know, I'm going to sort of invest a bit more time in seeing if this might be something for me. And sometimes even the no's, because I am arguably too kind of composition led. Sometimes when I say no, I'm like, actually, you know, let's test this. Let's go and have a closer look at this. Maybe you don't like it because it's challenging you in a way that you don't like being challenged. We're describing the beauty of the joy of approaching art in a way. But yeah, we do have that really innate sense of the things that we like, or the things that with which we want to surround ourselves.
And I think just on that point of hard work as well, and when we are challenged by an artwork, when we think about the relationships that are the deepest and the best, they're the ones that require the most amount of effort. We put our love, our sweat, our tears into those relationships. We speak deeply, and we get closer to that person, and you can only really do that with a certain amount of vulnerability. And I think hard work is sometimes about emotional vulnerability, and building a relationship with the galleries, the artists, the work itself, and learning to be able to re-see it as you change, and perhaps the work then adjusts for you. So I think going back to that concept of relationship, I think hard work is actually almost necessary to build a deep relationship.
Well, indeed, and you run the risk of ending up having a bunch of pictures that look kind of the same, you know, unless you're willing to invest in being challenged, I suppose, being confronted in a sense. Because we don't want people to walk into our space and think everything looks the same, or it looks, God forbid, like the page out of a magazine. You know, we want people to come in and think, fuck, or wow, or geez, I haven't seen something like that before, or I'm moved by that, I'm confronted by that.
Art being that reflection of life, exactly.
Yeah. I'm going to ask 3 more questions and then I'm going to turn it to the audience, but I think we're going to head to a slightly more salacious, kind of, interesting.
Time.
Yeah, okay.
I could have started out this way.
The sealed section is unsealed now. Now, it's funny, because I'm quite institutionalized. This is a thing I do, so, I'm kind of blind to it now. But the art world features, and it does really normalize some very unhealthy, strange, odd behaviors. So I'm kind of curious if you could share some of these observations or experiences about some of these, like, oh, that's weird.
Well, for me, I'm an imposter because I don't have an art curatorial background, so I just look at everything with wonder, but it's kind of that naivety sort of protects me. For me, my role is mostly administrative and community building, and part of the most amazing part of working at the art gallery is that we do all staff tours through exhibitions, and I am just with my notepad writing, so I think it can feel cliquey, and I also was intimidated about joining Atelier, which is a group of very, very cool people. And then I just thought, well, kind of what I've done in my life, I can stand on my own feet and represent myself, and I'm there to kind of facilitate. So I hear that there can be that kind of cliquiness or, elitism about art, but I choose not to buy into it because I'm sort of not of that world, but...
I mean, I was really fortunate relatively early on in my collecting career to develop a friendship with Melissa Loughnane in Melbourne, who had a gallery called Utopian Slumps, and fascinating seeing him in Tom Polo, Justin Hinder, among other artists represented in the images in front of you here. She signed on many of those artists very early in their career. Amber Wallace, artist who I've collected for a long time. So through Melissa, I was able instantly to join that clique, as it were. And as a young collector, I sort of didn't know much, but I knew what I liked. And whenever she would have a show, I was more often than not drawn to those works. And one of the pictures here is from Amber Wallace's first show, and she won the Brett Whiteley Travelling Scholarship with this particular painting. It was $300 at the show, and I said to Kate at the time, I said, "Darling, we've got to buy this whole show." And she said, "Oh, we can't do that." So we ended up buying 4 or 5 works from it, and then and of course, for her first show, we're her first real collector. So you inevitably form a friendship, a relationship. So for me personally, I've probably got Mel to thank a great deal for sort of bringing me into that clique. And of course, at the time, most of the people at that show at that very cool gallery in Collingwood, they were there for the free drinks. So and many of those sort of rat bags have gone on to become successful painters in their own right. So it was the cool club that I walked into with a little bit of money, and all of a sudden was able to participate in.
I guess I'll go back to the question, which was, are there some weird things? And one thing that I've noticed kind of recently, a few artist friends have been saying, come over for dinner and say, well, there'll be some artists and non-artists at the dinner party tonight. Which I just thought was the strangest thing, like who says that?
It's an architect.
Well, it's a non-artist. Absolutely. Yeah, sure, there's lots of kind of strange things you see, but in the end, artists are just people that get up and typically just work hard all day. Yeah.
Maybe I'm just weird, but it never feels strange to me. But on the cliquey side, I actually felt from the second that I started walking into galleries, I felt so welcomed. And maybe it was because I was a young collector and they were just so delighted to see someone young taking an interest in some of these artists' work. But from the get-go, every gallery that I purchased from in my very early days of collecting helped me work out a payment plan. They would call other galleries when I expressed interest in a work by a certain artist. Like Jeff from Neon Park was an absolute godsend early on to me. I was saying to him, there's this Caleb Shea sculpture that I'm absolutely obsessed with. I love it, and I just can't afford it. And he called up Adam at Lon and said, Nikita's amazing. She's bought a work from me in the past. You know, we worked out a payment plan. Like she managed to make it work. I reckon, like, if you could do 10% off and do a payment plan in this way, I think it would work for her. Can you do it? And he brokered that whole conversation for me, and made some of the introductions. And I've had the same with other gallerists who have gone on, and even when their artists have left, have made sure that they've introduced me to the new gallerist and helped me find my way through this amazingly broad ecosystem, and I felt so welcomed and so supported in that sense. So I've almost had the opposite experience. No Pretty Woman kind of situation where you're unwelcome, doors are slammed in your face. I think it looks intimidating from the outside, but I think when you're actually in the world, or when you choose to step into it and you do ask the questions, I think it's very welcoming. The one thing I'll say is that usually aren't prices right next to the artworks, and I think it's asking that first question that sometimes feels like the barrier, but beyond that, really, really accessible.
That's good. The art world's a good place. Moral of the story, I think. Okay, 2 more questions, and then I'm going to throw it to the audience. I read a really interesting article. Tracy Emin, as she was kind of, on death's door, started getting her estate ready, and part of that actually included making a list of artists she would never want to show with when she was dead. I mean, fortunately, she survived, so, but, that list exists and it's not being published.
That list in itself is an artwork, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
Put it in a frame.
Need in a neon and embroidery or something.
I've got one of those myself.
You do.
Joking.
Well, no, this is what I'm asking you to share now. What don't you want in your collection?
Oh. Wow.
Like, I want names, but if you don't want a name, you can name a trait, you can name a characteristic, a time, anything, just kind of,
No, I have probably a disproportionate prerogative towards living artists. I mean, I'm sort of this virtue signalling in a sense. I mean, I would rather support artists that are alive, so I don't have too many. I don't have a lot of old work. It's very, very kind of contemporary. So that's a quarter of an answer. Sorry, Michael.
No, that's very good. That's very good.
I find that's such a hard question to answer.
Just dodged it. Have a go.
Yeah, I don't want to name names, but I've got a few swimming around in my head.
There's their works, type of work.
There's certain bronze sculptures around the eastern suburbs that I wouldn't want anywhere near me.
I don't want that dog with the photograph.
Yeah.
I don't want. Who's that artist?
Julian Mark, is it?
Sorry, Julian. Yeah, I don't want that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That's a really, really tough one to answer in front of a crowd, Michael.
How much do you trust me? Nikita?
I love this question. I just need more time to think about it. All that I'm thinking of at the moment is all the artists that I love. But there is one thing that I would love to have in my collection, which I guess after it's utilised or performed won't be there, but I'd love to purchase a performance artwork that can be performed once and then kind of doesn't exist anymore. And I think that would be amazing, as kind of this moment in time that is ephemeral in your memory only. Would be beautiful.
Well, that speaks to your origin story of studying performance art. A beautiful full circle moment. And so, Naomi, the dog with the camera, or?
No, I'd probably just, if I was a street artist that has had some questionable choices, if I can leave it at that. So I think anyone, I don't mind a bit of scandal, because I think, like, there was all that terrible scandal around Bill Henson, and I think his works and him as a person are extraordinary. So I don't mind if there's some scandal. Also, I remember Boris had bought some artwork and it was like an Eve, and it's phenomenal artwork, and it was sort of naked in front of a church, and there was like lots of furor, so of course he bought it. Like sometimes that controversy is okay, but I think I'd steer clear of, really bad behaviour by men. But I'd probably keep the Picasso. So I don't know if that's a rule.
That's good. All right, so the final one, we're just going to wrap it up into a neat bow. So hopefully we've painted a very sort of broad brushstroke picture of kind of collecting and who you are as kind of, people who exist in this, what I think is sometimes a very weird world, but it's a very rewarding world. And that is, what is your collecting motto, if you could distill? Just a little catchphrase, a little piece of advice, just a little something to leave us with.
Looking at me, well, I've said it a few times, it takes time, but if I think about art as a whole, I love the Gerhard Richter quote, art is the highest form of hope, and I think hope is so different to everyone, and you are able to put your own experience into that story. So yeah, that's my little vignette for you all. Thank you.
Mine would be never stop, because one thing we do run out of is wall space. The desire to accumulate work never leaves us. We see things we love. We want to buy them. So never stop. Find a way.
Mine would be intuition, no strategy, and just keep looking. Yeah, that's the three that I kind of live by.
I think go as often as you can. It's not just about looking on Instagram and seeing the works represented visually in some kind of digital form. It's about being there, being in the environment, being in the community, being a part of it. I think if you're going to buy art, be in the world.
That's beautiful. I mean, we could actually take these slogans for everything in our lives. It's on to you now. Natalie has a microphone. Any questions from the audience? We have one.
I can yell if you want. Thank you so much. It's been an enriching conversation. I just think it would be remiss of us not to ask you, given the conversation around supporting the ecosystem, if each of you could identify one artist that's sort of piquing your curiosity at the moment, someone that maybe you haven't collected yet but you're interested in or curious about or challenged by.
I'm going to go first, Karen Black. I think sorry to steal, I think she's at Ames Yevels, and she's just phenomenal. Just the complexity of her work, and it takes quite a bit to understand, but it's masterful and very intuitive. Good question, Kim.
Love Karen Black. I think partly because I just ran into him, and because I'm seeing Nikita's picture of his here, and I do have one Darren Sylvester work, but just can't get enough. I think my next big purchase might be Darren Sylvester.
I've got two. Caitlin Eichwald shows at the Fortnite Institute in New York. These tiny little images, kind of vignettes of almost like kind of dream-like sequences. Quite amazing small little works. And the second is the other one I mentioned, Matthew McWilliams. I think is a good buy.
I'm going to go with Mia Bo. I did just purchase a work of hers about a week ago, but she's an artist that has one of the strongest visual languages that I've ever seen. Her work is immediately recognisable. It tells such a strong narrative as well, and it relates back to our Australian origin story. So I'd say as an Australian artist and as a female as well, I'm just so drawn to the works that she's producing. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Kim. Barry?
I have a whole lot of questions actually, but I think I'll reduce it to, you mentioned Instagram in the last moment there, and I just wondered if any of you have bought a work sight unseen, because for me, most good work really needs to be seen in the flesh to be fully appreciated.
Well, I'm going to jump in here, and it's a picture that's been on this slideshow. So I've wanted a Jude Ray work forever. I live in Melbourne. Well, you can't come and see it because they're gone, So I had to buy that from a PDF. You join the queue, and this one here. And yes, so it's mildly terrifying because you've spent made a significant investment in something that you've never seen. So that's the best example of a time where I've done it. I'd so much rather not, but in this case, other than jumping on a plane and coming up, I had no choice.
Again, and of course Jude has an incredible body of work, and the quality of the work is almost guaranteed at that point.
Indeed, so the risk is sort of mitigated somewhat, isn't it, when it's an artist that you've followed for a long time and whose work you love.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. Have any of you ever bought an emerging artist, sight unseen, from, say, Instagram or something else?
Yes, I have. I think aside from works by artists that I've got to know really well and know their works, I'd say 50% of my collection was sight unseen. Of the sight unseen that you're talking about through Instagram, I've probably got about 6 works, predominantly over COVID. But Atonga Tem is one of those artists, and she was still a very young, very new artist when I first purchased her about maybe 7 years ago, work by her. And I fell in love with the image, and I just could not say no. And it was a one of a kind in that size, and I had a perfect spot for it, and I could see it in my home, in my head. And so I went for it. And one thing that I will say to that question is I have never been disappointed. Every single work that has turned up that I have purchased sight unseen has been 2, 3, 4, 5 times as incredible in real life. And because there is this relationship that forms the second that you're present with the work, and you start to notice things that you don't see when you're kind of zooming in and trying to check it out, there's a different presence that's there. I think the depth of that work is always much more profound when it does arrive. It's exciting.
I've never bought anything off Instagram, but I've got a small flex. An absentee bid at the first draft auction, Daniel Boyd, $900. Yeah, and that's one of the only ones I've never seen.
Yeah, I haven't, Barry. I'm not brave enough. We've bought known artists from overseas, but yeah, nothing emerging. I'm buying other things on Instagram, like...
Every day.
Yeah.
One more question, and then we can... Was that a question there? No, just a stretch. Okay, last one. You make it good, okay? All right. Sorry, pressure.
I was listening to the talk and, the question about sculpture, painting. I'm an installation artist, and I would like to hear your thoughts on the space of like a relationship between artists who make ephemeral works or who make experiences or immersive work that can't be just hung on a wall or set on a plinth. Is there a room for you guys as like power and clout to be put behind artists like that, or are we just like bound to work with public institutions? Thank you.
I think absolutely, and going to my point before, that's actually on my roadmap. I would love to purchase an ephemeral work. I do also have a holograph, which is another way, obviously, a hologram, another way of obviously being able to embody that movement-based piece inside its own kind of tiny room, which is wonderful, and that's by an artist called Scotty So, and there are 3 different parts to it where he's dressed in different ways and comes out and performs. And so I feel like I have that kind of performance piece in my space in a way that's maybe a little bit more commercial or consumable. And so that's kind of an adaptation of what you're talking about. But absolutely, or even if you're hosting a big party and to be able to have an artist come in and present or build a space that's going to transform the environment, I think is incredibly exciting and definitely something I would do.
It's a great regret. The work I never bought was a Seal Floyer sound work, where they basically put Tammy Wynette on repeat, that song Till I Get It Right. It was the most incredible thing, but the edition was gone. And I think there definitely works, that you could live with. But I think we live in such an image-based society, and Instagram has a lot to kind of say for it, that kind of people want that kind of, that imagery and that kind of iconography that comes with, something tangible. But I think probably installation artists your career probably is more linked, you know, to an institution in the first instance. But I think, yeah, that's my honest opinion. Yeah.
At the art gallery with Atelier, we definitely support, but it was such an interesting flip at the end when you said if it is something privately we can support, and I do think that's a really interesting kind of, you know, proposition for us. Atelier has the freedom that we support a lot of performance, exhibitions, installations. So Shelley Lassiter's When I'm Not There, amazing dance choreography piece, Momentum Bracket Working Title, we've supported some of their works as well. So we get to do that as an institution, but I think that's such a interesting proposition. And yeah, I think there's ways, I'm thinking of Phoenix obviously, like that is a phenomenal way that artists are given a space, and yet we could do that on a smaller scale. So yeah, it's really interesting.
I think the important thing to also notice is, you know, the art market probably loves standardization and it loves conformity because these things are easy, they're neat, and they can be traded, painting and sculpture, you know, the binary. But, you know, there's a whole world of art that is not represented here. And, you know, we talk about ecology, and this is like a very important link, but there's many other links as well. And, sorry, this is like a bit gauche, but I encourage you to come to the Sunday talk, which is all about performance and the intersection of art, because we talk about practices that don't fit neatly and what artists are doing and what they will continue to do. And it's a very interesting area and a new kind of, well, not new, but it's a very, there's a lot of energy. And so I guess we should call it a day.
You did so well.